It is a book called Conference Pride. It is the ultimate book about the SEC college football. And a couple of days ago, my boss brought it in to me, and he said, Ronnie, why don't you get the author on to talk about this book? He set it down, and it was like a giant encyclopedia. Like, I've now made this part of my daily bag that I bring into the studio every day because it's just tons of nuggets. Jim Gumm, I hope you're doing well, sir. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Hey, Brian, I appreciate it, brother. And yeah, it's a book that anyone that does a radio show, especially in the South, probably needs to have it in front of them because there's inevitably something's going to come up that you can find the information real quick.
Yeah, and I thought about being a team player and leaving in the studio, but I also didn't want anybody to take it either. So I just decided to throw it in my bag and go home with me every day. But what a great just encyclopedia of SEC. And you've got a lot of passionate college football fans here in our area. Talk about sort of how the idea came about and how this developed into a book that we see now that weighs probably about 10 pounds.
Well, I tell you what, Ryan, what happened is that, there was always times where, I'd be watching games and, the announcers be talking and stuff. And then I'm sitting there going, well, I wonder what the answer to this is. I wonder what the answer to that is. And I'm like, and I'd try to scour the internet for all sorts of information. Couldn't find a lot of things I was curious about. I'm like, well, crap. I said, I guess if I'm going to figure out what the answers are, I'll need to do the research myself. And I started basically like that, and it morphed into what it became. And I'll be honest with you, man, it really is something. I found a lot of answers that I had no idea until I got into it. And really, there's a lot of things that I didn't know what I was getting myself into, because some of this research that I had to do was so difficult to do because, to be honest with you, man, there's not a good amount of good record keeping from like the 30s and 40s. And to find out some of the information that I did was really difficult to do. But I had a lot of people that really went to bat for me, and it really came to fruition. And one thing that I do want to share with your listeners out there, that this book is about on-the-field results, like any team that was like a game that was forfeited, like Mississippi State forfeited some games in the 70s. Alabama had to forfeit some games in the 90s. Alabama had to vacate games in the 2000s. Those games are included, and the reason I did that is because I know the games were played. I saw them, I watched them, they really did happen. So I did put in there some footnotes as to things that I included in this book that maybe the official NCAA wouldn't recognize, but those games were played, and so they're all included.
And you can find the book. I know I'm looking at it right now, but it's also available on Amazon. A lot of your favorite bookstores have a lot of people listening throughout the Southeast. It is called Conference Pride, the ultimate book about SEC football from 1933 to 2016. Being a guy that's a historian of the game of college football, how would you describe it? I know we're caught up right now in the moment, but how would you describe this current dynasty that Alabama's taken part in?
Well, I mean, it's as impressive as any streak that's ever been done in the SEC. I mean, right now, Alabama's currently on a 20-game winning streak, and they did win against SEC opponents, that is, against just SEC opponents. They did win 27 straight between 1976 and 1980 against just SEC teams, and Florida won 25 in the 90s between 94 and 97. So Alabama is on, they could conceivably break this streak that they themselves set back in the 70s, but it's really impressive. And you look at the history of the SEC and how difficult it is to go on the road and win games. That's the thing that I think makes the SEC so difficult as compared to a lot of other leagues, is going on the road and winning games. And, Alabama is going to go on the road 8, out of their 8 conference games, 4 of them are going to be road games each and every year. And that's what makes this streak so tough, is because you've got to go into some hostile environments and still come away with a win.
I also want to tie in and maybe get your thoughts about what we're having a conversation here about where the conferences rank. Is it fair to say, because it's kind of like what we do here in Tuscaloosa with this Alabama standard, but you look at the run the SEC was on a few years ago, and that ended, I guess, with the consecutive national titles would have been Auburn losing to Florida State in 2013. So another reason why we can dislike Auburn and Tuscaloosa. But you look at the SEC, that's the standard that they created, and we almost compare it. Do you believe it's a down year in the SEC? And if so, how far down is it?
Well, Ryan, in my opinion, the reason the SEC is not as at the level it was a few years ago is because I just don't think they got the coaching that they had. I mean, you look around the league, and there's, 4 or 5 guys on the hot seat, guys that really don't – they really didn't – well, yeah, and listen, I'm not, not sitting here trying to, bash, but when LSU hired Ed Orgeron, I thought it was, listen, I'm saying I could be totally wrong, but I thought it was a mistake right then and there. LSU should have found a way to get Tom Herman. They should have outbid Texas for Tom Herman. When I see some of these hires that have been going on in the past few years, it does make you sit there and go, is this the right guy for that job? Is he really a good fit for this program? And I think that's the reason that the SEC may be down just a smidge from where they were a few years ago. And you look around the country, I mean, you look at the Big Ten, for example. Look at some of the coaches they've got now. I think that's what, basically the Big Ten felt like what they had to do to catch up the SEC. They had to hire better coaches. And now you look around the Big Ten and some of their coaches, and then some of the coaches that are no longer in the SEC. And I think that's the big deal. I think the SEC in this coming cycle of firing coaches and hiring guys, they've got to do a better job of getting the right guy on the field. In Knoxville, Butch Jones, it's just not working. Listen, I think he's a good recruiter, but you got to do more than recruit. You got to coach him up once you get him, and I don't think he's doing a good job there. And there's some other examples around the league. I think Brett Bielema is doing a bad job at Arkansas. There are other examples out there that I'm not sold on McElwain at Florida, and so I think there's some really iffy hires that have happened in the SEC.
We're talking to Jim Gumm right now. He is the author of the book that we have mentioned several times. When you go back to Conference Pride, the ultimate book about SEC college football from 1933 to 2016. You can find the paperback edition right now on Amazon.com. If you're that fan that wants to go a little bit deeper than just the average fan, we talk about nuggets. And you also sent me another newsletter. And I'm a guy that likes to soak in all this information. I mean, I do a college football show in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's all we talk about. 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year. We talk nothing but football, football, football. And so the Blitz here sort of interlap this. How did you – because it's a newsletter that you publish every single week that's got a lot of little football tidbits here.
Yeah, I've been publishing the Blitz for 7 years. Prior to this, I was the sports editor of a football newsletter called The Kickoff, which has been around for over 60 years, and I founded this one on my own. It's an 8-pager each and every week. A lot of businesses are clients of mine, and what they'll do, they'll put their logos and whatnot on this publication and send it to their client list and their customers, and people just love stuff like this, and it's something that I've been doing for a long, long time. It's very, very affordable, but like I said, and basically doing the Blitz, a lot of questions I had about information. That's basically how I got Conference Pride going as far as the book, because a lot of the stuff that I would want to research for the newsletter is, like I said, it's a lot of questions I had. That's why I ended up writing the book called Conference Pride, which, by the way, I think would be a great Christmas gift for anyone out there.
No doubt. How do you subscribe to the Blitz if people want to go and subscribe here?
Right now the season is more than halfway over, and I would I prorate it's $9 a year can get you this newsletter, the digital version that I email. And if somebody wants to contact me, they're more welcome. They could just email me jimgumm.blitz@yahoo.com, and it's spelled JIMGUMM. It's like chewing gum with 2 M's, jimgumm.blitz@yahoo.com, and I'll be more than happy to shoot it out to them and let them try it out and see what they think.
Well, there's a lot of great information, no doubt. I just wanted to highlight that as well. Let me ask you, the Georgia Bulldogs, are you subscribing to what Kirby Smart is doing here when you talk about the Dogs in Athens?
I am. You know, this team has been a sleeping giant for a long, long time. And listen, I love Mark Richt. I thought he did a fabulous job at Georgia, and there was a few years that they did where they were in contention for some national accolades, but they'd always find a way to stub their toe against somebody. But boy, I tell you what, this is a solid football team. They're very, very physical at the offensive on offense at the offensive line. Very physical there. Defensively, they get after you. The one question mark I have about Georgia is that quarterback situation. I get that Fromm's playing really well and everything, but boy, there's still some things about him that I think when the game is put on his shoulders, can he will Georgia to a win? And listen, it's inevitable. We're going to see what he's made of when they play Auburn, and if they can get to the SEC championship game and play Alabama, we'll just see what this Georgia team's made of. But right now, I mean, I look at this game this coming weekend down in Jacksonville, and with Florida, all these guys that are elite, missing. I think Georgia's going to win that game fairly comfortably, but I think they've got 2 games left that really gets the only thing that can hold them back are Auburn and Alabama.
When you look at the college football playoff rankings coming out next week, I was looking here at the Blitz top 30. You've got Alabama, Penn State, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Let me go to the game of the week here, because when you look at 2 of your top 5 teams, with being Penn State and Ohio State, what do you see happening in Columbus, Ohio?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but the weather's supposed to be really bad there. It's supposed to rain. So that's going to make it sort of interesting to see which team can handle the elements better. But, the way that Ohio State looked against Oklahoma, they looked very, very bad. They really did. I watched the entire game, and they did not play well at all in that game. But since that game, man, Ohio State has been on fire. J.T. Barrett, and listen, let's not forget that he is running an offense that, they weren't running this time last year. Kevin Wilson, who was the former Indiana head coach, brought his offense in there, and J.T. Barrett was still finding his way. Boy, they have found their way here lately. They've scored 228 points the last 4 games, averaging 57 per game, and they are on fire offensively. And defensively, they get after you pretty good. I think this is going to be a really entertaining game. I like Ohio State, the fact that they're at home. If this game was being played at Happy Valley, I might have picked Penn State, but I think Ohio State's going to find a way to win this game. And if they do, I think Ohio State has the inside track to win the Big Ten, because I think they'll go on and win the rest of their games, probably play Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. And if they win that, they're a shoo-in to make it to the playoffs. And so I think this is a huge game, but I like Ohio State going into this game.
If you look back at the SEC, knowing someone who has studied this conference and the history, is there any possible scenario that you could see 2 teams from the SEC in this college football playoffs?
I can. I think what would have to do, both Georgia and Alabama would have to win out and be undefeated when they play each other. And then if it's a very competitive, a clean game, not a sloppy game, a really competitive game that is won, the margin of victory is by a field goal by either Georgia or Alabama. And if the other conferences have some, like TCU gets beat like by, say, Oklahoma, you've got some, like Miami gets beat in the ACC, and there's really no other undefeated teams out there. So where you've got a one-loss either Alabama or one-loss Georgia going against other one-loss teams across the country, I think you can make a strong argument. And if you're Georgia, you want Notre Dame to play well down the stretch, because that win will look good on your resume. And if you put Georgia against Notre Dame, the head-to-head has to be taken into consideration. And the fact that Georgia won on the road at Notre Dame, I think would bode well for Georgia. So I think there is a scenario. I think everything has to fall just right. But I don't think you could have a blowout in the SEC championship game and that one-loss team get in. I think it needs to be a very competitive game.
Let me ask you, when you look back at the book here and going back here, we're talking to Jim Gumm. He is the guy that is the author of the Blitz. He's also put together a wonderful book. It is a thick book. So if you're just talking about one of these little paper thin books, no, this one's probably what, 3.5, 4 inches thick. It's a gigantic book.
502 pages.
502 pages of SEC college football information. You can find it. You can simply email him, or you can visit your favorite bookstore. But it is jimgumm.blitz@yahoo.com. You could Jim Gumm, and as he said, it's just spelled just like gum, but it's just double M there at the end. So it's Gumm. What was your favorite part together when you were putting together this book and this encyclopedia of SEC? What was your favorite part to put together?
Well, favorite and also challenging is finding like the stadiums that every single game that's listed in this book. I put the stadium that the game was played in, and some of these were hard to find because, to be perfectly honest with you, man, some of the record keeping wasn't too good. Here, a good example: in 1943, Vanderbilt played, and a lot of people out there may not realize this, but during World War II. There were a lot of World War II service teams that played college football. Basically, the best athletes in the United States had been drafted, and they weren't on college campuses. They were in boot camps or in the military, and they put together club teams, and they barnstormed across the country. And they played college football teams and won their fair share. But Vanderbilt played a game against Camp Campbell, which is up there in Kentucky, in Bowling Green. We know it now as Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Well, I was sitting there going, okay, I asked Vanderbilt, I said, do you know where that game was played? They said they don't. So I contacted, Fort Campbell. I finally got in touch with a lieutenant, and I told him what I was doing. He goes, I tell you what, he goes, I'll get one of my guys to do some research. He sent an enlisted guy to the public library there in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and I guess they looked at the microfilm from the newspaper from back in the 40s. He found the name of the ball, the field that the game was played on, and they emailed it to me. So I had to do stuff like that. It was so difficult, but once I got every single playing site, it was a lot of satisfaction.
Oh, I can imagine. But, hey, Jim, I got to give you a big thank you, not only for the interview. Certainly the book is a great read for SEC fans. But, man, you're going to make me sound so much smarter than I really am to my audience, man. I mean, I'm going to be able to spit out there.
I'll tell you what, Ryan, if anyone that's an SEC football fan that's listening to you, and I'm assuming all your listeners are, to me this is a must-have for any SEC football fan. If you have wondering what to get someone for Christmas, go to Amazon.com, order the book. It'd be a great Christmas present for anyone that loves SEC football.
It is simply The Conference Pride, the ultimate book about SEC football from 1933 to 2016. Hey, Jim, thank you again for joining us. Great job on the book. I know I'm going to enjoy diving a little deeper into it, but this Blitz is also a great newsletter, and I've enjoyed reading that as well. Thank you again, and I hope you'll come back and visit with us again here in Tuscaloosa.
Anytime, Ryan. Take care.